I'm Joseph Miller, known as Joe Miller. Nobody ever calls me Joseph. So anyway, I was named after an uncle. So that's why they called me Joseph. And I was born in Port Glasgow, in Scotland, on the River Clyde. And Port Glasgow, people think, oh, you were born in Glasgow. But no, Port Glasgow is about 20 miles down the River Clyde from Glasgow. So it's quite different from Glasgow. There's only a population of about 19,000. But in that small town, at one time we had actually 6 shipyards. It was a shipbuilding town. And we also had a big mill. They made canvas, and they had a rope work. They made ropes for the ships. They had a rope walk that was a mile long, where they made the ropes for the ships. And so it was quite a busy town, Port Glasgow, mostly shipbuilding. The men were all hard workers in the shipyard, all the different trades, carpenters, electricians, joiners, everything you can think of. They were all mixed together. Welders only came later. At first, when I started, the ships were all riveted. There was no welding. And the ship was also built one piece at a time. It's not like today when everything's prefabricated and they lift big chunks of the ship and put it together. They weigh about 50 tons. But in my day, they put all the frames, that's the ribs of the ship, they put them all up one by one. And then they put the plates on top of that, one by one. And the riveters, they had a little furnace on the ground where they used to heat the rivets. The rivets would become red hot, and the guy at the little furnace would throw the red hot rivets up to the people on the staging, and they would put the rivets in the hole, and there would be a guy on the other side. He was called a holder-on, and the guy on the outside used pneumatic tool for hammering the rivets in, and the guy was inside the ship, and he was a holder-on. He held the other end of and flattened it out. So that's how they did joining all the plates together. It was all rivets until the welding came in. So, but this was during the war, 1942. I joined the shipyard straight from school when I was 16. And because I was pretty good at drawing at school, my father thought I should go into the drawing office, which suited me all right. I didn't really want to go in the shipyard and work. I prefer to be in the office. But first of all, instead of going straight into the drawing office, we went into the loft, the mould loft, where they made all the templates for different parts of the ship. And my job in the loft was putting all the holes in the templates, for the rivets. And it happened to be the winter time when I started there. And the place was so cold, there's no heating in it. And I had to hold on to this handle and pull it down to bore the holes. And eventually my hand got so cold that I couldn't move my fingers. And that was terrible. And eventually the foreman, he took me up to his office, and he had a little heater in there, and he let me hold my hands in front of the heater. And I was actually crying with the cold. It was so bad. But that was the kind of conditions I worked under in those days. And the poor men out in the shipyard, they had to work in the cold, manoeuvring all these big plates and frames and everything. Oh, it wasn't easy. And they had, what do you call it? All round the ship, they had these planks, staging, it was called. All round the ship, they had staging. And in those days, they only had a single plank. And there was always somebody falling off these planks and getting killed. Yeah, it was terrible. And then they come in with more safety measures, and they used 2 planks to walk on instead of just 1. So that cut down the fatalities quite a bit. But it was marvellous to watch the ship coming together piece by piece until it ended up as a ship. It was fantastic. I loved it. And I wasn't allowed to go up on the staging in the ship because I was just out of school. And sure enough, I would have fallen off probably and get killed. So I wasn't allowed to go anywhere it was dangerous. And because the big occasion was the launch of the ships. That was marvellous. I'd never seen that before. The ship was built on ways. They were sloping. And they had what they called a sliding wave. And one big piece of wood, it was quite thick, it was resting on top of the other wood that was fixed there. And they put grease between the 2 layers for the ship to slide on. So it actually slid down the ways into the water. And that was quite exciting to watch that. So I had to stay in the loft for 1 year before I went to the actual drawing office. So I really enjoyed working with the men in the loft. They were all very clever people. They made all these templates for every part of the ship. And the men from the yard come up, collected the templates, took them down to the shed, and then they used the templates on the plating. And they marked it all out from the template, all the rivet holes and the shape of the piece was all done from the loft. And it was, nowadays it's totally different. It's all done by computer nowadays. But in those days, everything was done by hand. And it was quite an exciting time I had for 1 year, watching ships being built. So most of the ships we built were for India. Ships called the Royal Pindi and all Indian names. And when the ship was ready, all these coolies came to the shipyard and they started to get to know the ship after it was all fitted out. After the ship was launched, it went into the dock and it was all fitted out with all the joiner work. All the rooms were made. All the electrical stuff was put in. And, well, all the different trades were all involved. There was all kinds of them. They had air conditioning in the ship. The painters were everywhere. And in those days they didn't have sprays. It was all done by brush or roller. And my father was a painter. And he eventually became the foreman painter in the yard. And that was marvellous because they had painters come to the house and we had a beautifully painted house. It was gorgeous. They used to do all kinds of fancy work in the house. They even put gold flake on it. Yeah, and lined it all. They used it all liners. They made lovely designs. It was stippled. Fantastic. My shipbuilding training lasted for 5 years as an apprentice. And during that time, you had to start at the beginning. You done something simple, and then it got harder and harder. And at the same time, I went to night school and took a lesson in naval architecture to learn something about shipbuilding and the design of it. So it was always a learning process. And I stayed in that shipyard throughout my apprenticeship. And then I stayed for another 2 years after that, I think. I'm not sure. But the wages at that time were terrible low. They only paid us peanuts. So if you wanted more money, you had to move. So I moved to another shipyard in Port Glasgow. And I went from big ships to small ships. They only built tugs and ferry boats, things like that. But eventually I moved on to Glasgow, and I worked in a big shipyard there called Fairfields, and started to work on bigger ships. In fact, we built lots of ships for the New Zealand trade. They were refrigerated ships, and they were the ones that brought all the lamb and everything to Scotland. So, but we built all types of ships. But the most famous one, I think, was a cruise liner called the Empress of Britain. And that ship was launched by the Queen, of all people, you know. And I had drawn a lot of the plans for that ship. And eventually I took a really nice photograph of that ship while it was sailing down the Firth of Clyde past the Clough Lighthouse. And I liked that picture of it so much that I made a painting of it.